All right, so I am going to find a question from my talk, which they did not approve continuing education units for the topic of cover crops, but we're going to argue with that.
You know, I've been talking to DPR about this, and one of the things that came out of our Chlorpyrifos Alternative Task Force is we've got to change the allowed topics for the CEUs to things like this. And there is a lot of receptivity at DPR to doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we brought that subject up with the director at the AAIE meeting at the end of last year,
Yep.
and they, were more receptive to it than I would have expected.
I think get your suggestions into them because they're ready to do something. Yeah.
Yeah, because many of these aspects do affect pest management, even if it's a nutritional aspect.
Absolutely.
And as if they're depending on us to, provide advice and assistance to the growers, then we need to be educated and kept up to date on all aspects of the plant growth, not just specifically pesticides or pest control strategies.
Yep.
Well, I mean, to me, the heart and soul of the definition of IPM is preventive. So this, and then like you say, when you fill out that pesticide application to use a regulated material, there's a box there that asks if you've considered alternatives.
Yep.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah, that was basically because of CEQA, that they.
Yeah, that was the CEQA.
Right, and essentially, most people write recommendations are in violation of that particular statement. And one of my partners brought up the fact that not only that, but when we're asked to write recommendations for land that is in a pest management district that is required to have a treatment, it's not the pest management district or any of the employees of the government who are liable for any problem with that recommendation. It's the pest control advisor who is liable for that, even though he's required by law to write it.
Yeah.
Going back to what Steve said about UC Riverside, is it necessary that a product and a program like BioFlora's program be peer-reviewed and accepted by authorities like UC in order to be considered a viable alternative according to CEQA?
My comment there is that it becomes linear thought. And the problem in the university is that they've departmentalized each other into linear thinking as opposed to matrix thinking.
Right.
Matrix thinking is part of in my opinion, the new understanding and why a BioFlora program actually works. It's not just about putting in a few trace elements and NPK and stuff. This is a matrix. It's a very complex matrix. So if you're a linear thinker, you can't look at that and say, wow, I need to have the silver bullet that's there that I want to look at so I can take it back to the university and we can study the silver bullet as opposed to the matrix.
You gotcha.
Right. I've had this discussion with Beth Grafton Caldwell that she said that the university would test any product, that we wanted to put forward as a way of curing HLD. And I came back with that it's not a product, it's a system. It's agroecology. Right. It's a whole ecological approach to growing a plant in a healthy ecosystem, healthy soil, and resulting in the optimal health of the plant. And the university is not set up to evaluate ecosystems. It's not something you can do in 3 months and write your master's or PhD thesis. So the work hasn't been done, and the approach isn't currently being looked at. So this is, in a sense, one of the stimuluses of doing this webinar is to get these these ideas into the community discussion. So thank you all for contributing to that.
You know, the comment about the university, there's been a lot of integrated work done in the University of Florida, and they've looked at, you know, a whole slew of things. They've thrown the kitchen sink at this, and it does not turn around HLB. You know, prolongs the trees' agonies for 2 to 3 years, but then they still die.
Haven't seen the kind of systems that that we were talking about today, though. I haven't seen the selection of crop variety, the enhancement of soil microbial biodiversity, and integration of biocontrol. I haven't seen it to the level that we were talking about today, actually. Have you in Florida? I haven't. I mean, the growers tell me they haven't seen that.
Yeah.
That
Well,
support.
Yeah.
And
I'm
that's
muting
also
for a
what
moment.
those farm advisors there in Orange County, Florida, are observing with their cooperators with the cover crops.
You
So-
didn't ever see a cover crop in Florida. I drove, I forget how many thousands of acres we drove, and I just one, I mean, just even weeds I was looking for. And it's basically herbicide wall to wall. And I just said to myself, well, how can they make these trees be healthy when there's no substrate for the microbes to actually live in? And it's just the way that they farm. And if somebody could tell me where an orchard in the entire state of Florida is that actually has a cover crop and actually is doing rotations and growing a summer cover crop and a winter, I'd like to know where it is, because I've never seen one.
Crops, okay, originally, if you go back to the history of Florida citrus, a large percentage of the big crops are owned by cattle ranchers. And what they did is they moved it because of the temperatures changing in the 1960s. So they moved actually farther north than they were before, okay? Back in the 1970, we were treating our palm trees. All the palm trees in Southeast Florida and Southwest Florida died, the coconut palms, from Leverbacter, a cousin of the citrus Leverbacter. We were nailing the spikes in and doing the tetramycin. Eventually they died. Now, I've had trees in this yard. They're hit by adult psyllids on a regular basis, but not at the numbers they were before, because now the adult psyllids have pretty much destroyed the groves around me and a lot of the citrus around me. But my citrus is healthy, and all of the leaves coming out are not gnarly and misshapen. Now, I do basic organic fertilizers, some of it being from Mexican sunflower breakdown. That's all I've done aside from staying strictly with a lot of biologicals. I've never had eggs go all the way to adulthood in the last 2 to 3 years that I've seen, and I'm out there almost every day. It's like almost, it's a wall, as I understand, it's a wall-less bacteria. And it's the amount of activity that it gets, more or less. The nymphs are inoculating and re-inoculating as they're going through the growth cycle. The adults are not. They're responsible in the early, Mashad's work back in the early 2000s had it about 4% of the damage to the trees was from the adults. So the key is not to have a lot of psyllids in your trees, along with good nutrition, I believe, my reality. But I've been doing it since 2011. I let it go through 2013. And those trees, I can send you videos and images, look like they were at death's door and they came back. Okay? Now, I'm not a microbiologist. I just took things 1, 2, 3, 4 at a time. And linear thinking is not going to get this where it has to go. This is going to have to go from just what you're seeing here. People trying and making an effort and learning from each other. It's extending the life of the tree now and making it productive for as long as it can be. That it's going to be economically feasible to keep growing citrus. But Florida, their practices here have been terrible for, they had it made for years and years and years. Sandy, it's not even soil, it's sand. Either you put an investment in it, but if you're constantly hitting it with herbicides and everything else, and it was a false climate, ready to fall. So then what do? They go up to 2 times a year on the neonics and the other stuff. They're doing helicopter sprays and everything else. Then they ratchet up to 4 times a year.
Yep.
Is there something wrong in this picture about good health?
Yep.
Somebody said in the chat room, it says, I agree with Ben, we're delaying the inevitable, but they're still raising citrus in China and India and
Yes,
Brazil. So has it actually wiped out 90% of the citrus on the entire earth? I don't think so.
No.
Has it even wiped out 90% of the citrus in Florida?
When you take the islands that were growing citrus and they were able to control the psyllid, the trees stayed healthy and they were productive. And that's going on right now. I can't remember the name of a couple of the islands. See, I love islands too because I can depopulate a certain species. Not that I want to depopulate the earth, but I'm supposed to be after the bad guys or girls. There's a lot of things to keeping it going. What I haven't seen there in California that exists here is when I first went to California, it was a different world compared to the way they were doing citrus here in Florida. It's like doing veal. You know, you have a baby calf that stays in a stall until somebody takes it out, butchers it, and eats it. It's not living a life. It's not being productive except for what the owner wants. So coming at it from these guys are gonna, they pay, I talk to them a lot now. This guy's out doing their sprays at night because they can't afford to keep people doing the labor that's required right now. They're starting to turn around and look at reinvesting and doing more fertilization and learning about different ways of doing fertilization. So it's going to be a lot of things that extend its life until they find a way to control the constriction that it does within the plant.
Mm-hmm.
So what are they doing in Brazil and China and India? They still have a citrus industry, right?
Who can tell you what they're doing, because I know a couple of people in South California that were invited to China not too long ago, and organic growers that actually interacted with them. So there needs to be more of this, I think.
Well,
so there's still an industry, right?
Is that they have a different temperature difference, and so the climate conditions don't make it quite as severe as Florida.
Right, and plus you've got, it's not as easy for the psyllid to spread like it's spreaded in Florida. We're one flat thing about 6 feet high, okay?
Yeah.
There's a lot of coastal rain and winds coming in that blows all kinds of insects back and forth. And they immediately tried to put a lot of chemistry on it, and then they kept increasing and increasing it. And after the fire started, someone, you know, this is the center of it now. I don't see it in California that way, unless they start getting really bad habits.
Ken?
Yes.
From what I understand, you'll have a commercial citrus grove that has trees that are dying from the HLB, and you know, right next door across the street, there'll be trees in somebody's yard that are you know, untended, that are doing just fine. Is that
was the amazing thing to me, because when I started going around, and I did this every day for 6 years, except for when I was coming out to California or someplace else, I would go to groves, and across the street would be a yard with a citrus tree that's healthy, and the grove's going down, and they're replacing trees at that point, interdispersed among the other trees, because it's a big deal to have a citrus grove on the very west coast of Florida where the snowbirds come, because they buy a lot of citrus to send home to their families at an outrageous price. There's citrus ice cream, there's citrus everything here in the Phloem, okay? What I kept saying was, when I saw diversity of plants in neighborhoods, and this is what gets me when they started sending out flyers, and I saw some from the master gardeners about, we'll plant an apple tree. You know, you get this crossover going back and forth. Which is the better growing environment? The one where the people just let everything grow in their yard, the natural plants, and where there's some defense because you've got a natural biological system still taking place. The smaller groves, let's say down in the Fallbrook and the Palma Valley area, those groves are surrounded by all kinds of natural flowering plants and everything. And when I go into them, and Jim there works them constantly, there's all kinds of life and spiders and everything else doing the job. So it's also about a high ratio. You have to see a small plant with several hundred adults mating and eggs on every part of the flush. But if you come back in 48 hours and 70% of those eggs are gone, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So it's how we.
Go ahead, Ken.
I still think California, I kept waiting for the bomb to fall since 2008. In California, Jim knows, he's looking at me like, yeah, he keeps coming over and it's like, I'm not finding what I see in Florida at all.
Mm-hmm.
So extending the life of the trees and stuff like that, that's what a lot of the farmers are talking about.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate the comments from Robert Hill, and a couple comments back. I'm also, I keep thinking about, is that new phloem or clearing of old phloem? And I don't know if Srivanas has any more to say about that, but my background is human nutrition and physiology. Human ecology is what led me into pesticide use reduction and working with my father. But when in human tissue, particularly I understand when with atherosclerosis, and when heart tissue gets clogged, it doesn't take long for new arteries brand new arteries to form in the human heart. I'm sure it's, I have no idea if that is correlate at all with tree phloem, but
no, it is. In fact, if you look at the stem cell, potency, when you look at the originating cells, undifferentiated cells, and that is the potency which it gives the mammals and humans the power to regenerate. And in here, if you look at a few examples, such as, Steve mentioned about those enhanced cells in Parenchyma due to the program. So it has the potential to generate new cells. And now that only we can decipher, whether it is, just the same phloem or whether it is, the new phloem by analyzing the genetic pathway. So right now, that is what we are analyzing. It is very hard to speculate, but I believe that, our program gives the capability of the plant to regenerate new cells.
Well, I'm for the effort.
I would like to add in here that one of the researchers at UCR is working on a test kit where you can in the field test adult ACP for the presence of HLB. Because a lot of the entomological experts are expecting that the infestation in California is going to be like a tsunami, that it's a hidden infestation right now, but as the years go by and the disease starts to express itself, we're going to find that it's all over. But it's been 8 years and we haven't experienced that yet. And I'm really looking forward to getting to use this test to check psyllids all over, because all the psyllids and plant material that's gone through the testing labs has all been negative except right around the HLB finds.
Which I don't exactly get. And the reason I don't exactly get
2,000
that,
trees out of 10 million. So it's,
it's almost like being a little pregnant. Okay. You're only just a little bit pregnant. You're not over that line. It's like LD50, right? You're a little pregnant, because there's where they're saying there has to be so much of the bacteria or bacterium present in order for it then to become the active disease.
Correct.
Sounds
So
like
if you
coronavirus.
can keep it down to a specific amount, or it doesn't exceed it. I mean, all I know is I didn't do anything fancy here, and I had thousands of them on it every day. And it's very frustrating. When I brought the trees in and I started, I made sure I had the trees that they liked the best, the lemons, the tangelos. I did one cocktail citrus that my wife wanted because it had 6 different things on it. that they're all healthy. Okay, I'm in the middle of it. I'm talking about, I can go out on any day when it's warm out and I can count, I can see dozens upon dozens of psyllid adults having at it on the flush whenever there's flushes. I just went through on the Mineola, it just went through a flush and they were all over it. Not to the extent they were back in 2011 through 15 or 16. That's because a lot of the citrus has died off around me. I don't know the answer,
So
but I
that's
know
true.
they're healthy.
That's true. The citrus industry is changing, and they're going to higher densities. They're replanting more frequently. You don't expect to see a 100-year-old tree like you see in Fillmore any longer.
No.
The trees in China and Brazil are only 10 or 50. They keep expanding into new areas where HLB is not present. So
Where it is, they're looking 9 to 11 years, what they can productively gain out of the crop.
right. So, you know, the old ways are dead, you know, in those areas that have been infested with HLB for a while. So one of the goals in California has been to keep it at bay so that we can come up with some solutions, some varieties, selections, some Australian finger lime blood in them that is resistant to HLB.
Oh yeah.
So
I've got about 600 papers on my left-hand computer. Read them all. Going back to the 1950s. I mean, there's tons of stuff out there, and including from China. It's a lot of it's accessible now.
Well, I think
So-
before we do all that, we try the approach that we have been talking about today.
Yeah. So
Or even better yet, let's start it 30 years ago.
I just like to see orange trees instead of all apple trees. It just doesn't fit with California.
so there's that desire to have that silver bullet, you know, that one thing that will make the big difference. But again, it seems to be the ecology. Bill Clinton, when he was running for president, had a sign behind his desk that said, "It's the economy, stupid," to keep reminding him that he needed to hammer home the message, you know, of the economy. And so I'm thinking of a sign that says, "It's the ecology, my friend." And
EPM, ecological pest management. Put integrated
Yep.
pest management under EPM and inside the envelope.
yeah.
Yay.
I've seen it abused too much.
Absolutely agree.
Any last words from anyone?
So-
That's not a bad note to end on.